I was saying, y'all, it's your boy Rico from Street Scores, and the Commanders have signed another tackle. But let's not forget, let's focus on the fact that it is a tackle guard, another positional flex, versatile guy that's going to compete for a backup role. No, I'm not even going to sit here and lie to you and act like we signed this guy to start at tackle, but you never know. He has some potential to him. Of course, we're going to talk about everything that he's done so far since he's been in the NFL. He is a veteran. This is not some super young guy. He's been around for a few years. So I want to take a look at his past and potentially project what his future could be here. Also, with the fact that we keep bringing in so many offensive linemen this free agency period and making sure that we re-sign most of ours that had contracts coming up, are we shifting our draft focus to potentially going corner in the first round? We're going to talk about all of that and more, but before we do, make sure you subscribe to the channel, hit the bell next to the subscription button so you get notification immediately and every time I release an informative and opinionated video just like this one. Make sure you pull up every Sunday for the Commanders Call-In live stream show where we talk about everything Commanders. Open up the phone lines, y'all call in. Make sure you stay tuned for everything draft, everything free agency. I'm working on film sessions for draft prospects in this upcoming draft. I'm working on more mock drafts, everything. I have so many things I need to report for y'all. I'm just been so busy, but I'm getting to it. Without further ado, let's get it. All right, so the Commanders have announced that they signed offensive tackle / offensive guard Trent Scott. He was a 2018 undrafted free agent. He's played with the Chargers, the Panthers, and the Steelers. And so far, he's had 20 starts. And as of right now, he will be the 4th tackle on our roster, depth chart wise. But we'll see. I mean, he has some potential to him. You never know. He'll at the very least provide some depth at defensive tackle for the Commanders. Now, whether he'll make the roster or not, just like Abdullah Anderson, it just depends on how well they come out and ball out. I'm not saying he's an automatic roster lock, but competing with Cornelius Lucas and Sadiq Charles and all of those guys, I mean, it's just another positional flex guys. All of these guys that can play tackle or guard, he's competing directly with these guys fighting for a roster spot, and he has a chance to make it. He's 29 years old. He wound up going undrafted out of Grambling back in 2018. He later signed on with the Chargers and spent 2 years on and off their roster, practice squad, back and forth, all of that type of stuff. The Panthers claimed Scott off of waivers at the start of the 2020 regular season and brought him back on a 1-year contract in 2021, and then the Steelers signed him in the 2022 season. In 2022, Scott appeared in 8 games for the Steelers and only made 1 start. He's 6'5", 320 pounds, and he's more depth and should immediately compete for a backup role, like I said. I mean, you never know. It's not impossible for him to just suddenly figure something out. Maybe something clicks and he's competing with Andrew Wiley and Charles Leno, but I highly doubt it. He's directly competing with other guys that we've signed so far in free agency and the backup type of guys like Cornelius Lucas, who's been our backup swing tackle for the past couple of years. And just to let you know, even though he played in 8 games, that 1 start came the final game of the season against the Browns. So they probably took that opportunity to evaluate him real quick and see what they have in him, if they want to keep him, if they don't. Apparently, by the way that they let him walk, they didn't like him that much. But this guy has played both left tackle, and right guard during his 5-year NFL career, again positional flex, and has started 20 of the 61 games that he's appeared in, like I mentioned earlier. And remember, not only did we already have several tackles, guards, tackle guards that can play both already on the roster, but then we signed Andrew Wiley, who's technically our biggest free agency signing so far. You never know what may happen in the second phase before the draft, these upcoming couple of weeks, and then you never know what may happen in the third phase, because remember, we didn't get Charles Leno and some other key players on our team until after the draft. You never know, so we may still make a bigger signing later. Maybe Bobby Wagner just doesn't have the market that he thinks. Maybe we get him later. This is just completely hypothetical and optimistic talk, but I'm just saying, even though Andrew Wiley is our biggest free agency signing right now, he may not be by the time this is all said and done. We get to training camp and all of that, but we'll see. But again, we signed Andrew Wiley, who's a tackle guard. You have Nick Gates, who's a guard center. We re-signed Tarlin Larson, who is obviously a center, so not technically directly competing with Trent Scott. But don't forget, we signed Drew Himmelman as well, who has a very high ceiling, super boomer bust tackle that can play either right or left if you want him to. So this guy Trent Scott is competing with the tackles, he's competing with the guards. It's a little hectic for him because this organization still really likes Sadiq Charles, even though he keeps getting hurt. Remember Samuel Cosme, he's more than likely moving to right guard this season, and maybe that's where they project him to go on for the rest of his career. Again, I think he would be best at guard. Ideally, if you have a guy that can be really good at tackle or guard, positional value, you prefer him at tackle. But I think just like Brandon Sheriff playing tackle in college, transitioning to guard at the NFL level would bring out the Pro Bowl, all-pro player that he can be, that I really truly believe Samuel Cosme can be. But my point is, Samuel Cosme is another tackle guard, technically, even though they probably want him to continue playing guard. Again, the guy right next to him, projected right tackle, Andrew Wiley's going to start at right tackle more than likely, but he also plays guard as well. You have Cornelius Lucas, who's a swing tackle. Again, Drew Himmelman, who's a swing tackle potentially with a lot of potential, really high ceiling. We still have Andrew Norwell in the mix technically, and y'all know I'm very high on Chris Paul as a potential starting left guard for us. Chris Paul is already competing with Nick Gates and Andrew Norwell for that starting left guard spot. I loved what I saw from him in that last game of the season against the Cowboys. A lot of young guys stepped up, not just Sam Howell. Chris Paul looked great, Khalid Hudson looked great, Percy Butler looked great, just to name a few. Some of the rookies, some of the younger guys that haven't been able to get a lot of playing time up until that point where the season was already lost. So Rivera was like, we might as well go ahead and see what our young guys can do, and a lot of those guys stepped up. And Chris Paul, you can argue, had the best game out of all of them. Of course, Sam Howell had the flashiest game. He's the quarterback. He had the highlights. He had the great touchdown run, all of that type of stuff. But Chris Paul was great at left guard in that game. Really, really good. So he's already competing. He's my favorite option at left guard. I think Andrew Norwell does receive a little bit more hate than he deserves. But if I'm betting on who I think could eventually become the best guard that we currently have on roster, I think is Chris Paul. But of course, again, technically our second biggest free agency signing was Nick Gates, who plays center guard. So you have all of these guards competing for the left guard spot. Again, Samuel Cosme already presumably has the right guard spot on lock. Andrew Wiley has the right tackle. Charles Leno has left tackle. So Trent Scott is out here competing for wherever he can fit in. I think it would more than likely be him competing against the tackles like Cornelius Lucas, Drew Himmelman, kinda Cosme, definitely Andrew Wiley and Charles Leno technically. And then, I mean, you can kind of throw Sadiq Charles in there as well a little bit. So I feel like he's definitely competing against those guys more directly. But man, at the end of the day, he's just trying to make this team. And offensive linemen, unlike linebackers, even kind of defensive linemen, DBs, wide receivers, running backs, they can find a way to contribute on special teams to, at the very least, be irreplaceable in some way to where the Commanders have to find a way to keep you on the roster because you're such a special teams ace. Offensive linemen usually aren't those guys. So Trent Scott, you're going to have to go out there and directly be better than a Drew Himmelman and maybe even a Cornelius Lucas to make this team. So I think it's really interesting to really keep track of how he looks in these upcoming OTAs, mini camps, training camp, see how far he makes it in training camp. Does he get cut in one of the earlier cuts, or does he make it to the end and then get cut for the 53-man roster? Does he make the 53-man roster? This is going to be a very interesting person to track because, again, 6'5", 320 pounds. There's some potential there. You can work with that. And it's crazy, too, because we still technically don't have an offensive lines coach, which is even more insane with all of the offensive linemen that we've brought in through free agency already, and then all of the ones that we're strongly interested in as far as the draft goes. It's crazy that we still don't have an offensive lines coach. We have an assistant offensive lines coach, but we don't officially have a true offensive lines coach right now. I'm surprised that hire hasn't already been made. I'm surprised that we didn't fire the one we already had and had a new replacement already ready. Why do you fire that guy and not have an immediate replacement ready to take over the spot? Or at the very least, just go ahead and promote the assistant to the one. Again, we have some options from the Chiefs. Eric Bieniemy could bring over his offensive lines coach from Kansas City, or the assistant to come be the offensive lines coach here. We have a lot of options. You can even move Pete Heiner from tight ends coach to offensive lines coach. You have a lot of options, but it's just crazy that we still haven't filled that in. And then speaking of the draft, with us bringing in so many offensive linemen in free agency, it's looking like maybe we're shifting our focus in the draft, especially like first round, second round specifically, more so towards corner. Because the only corner we've signed this free agency period, I mean, we technically brought Danny Johnson back, but that doesn't stop you from taking a corner in the first round. And Cam Dantzler, I like his potential. I like how you can kind of compare him to maybe like a Benjamin St. Juste. He's a guy that hustles, but he does get beat quite a bit on tape. that doesn't stop you from taking a corner. Whereas like Andrew Wiley, he's coming in to be a starter. Nick Gates is a direct backup and may even compete as a starter. But Danny Johnson technically isn't a starter. Cam Dantzler definitely isn't an assumed starter. So it looks like with all of the offensive linemen we're bringing in and the level of offensive linemen that we're bringing in, specifically like an Andrew Wiley, it's looking like we're focusing on trying to solve offensive line potentially in the draft so we don't have to overreact and maybe reach on the guy. And they may be going head first into corner in the first round or second round. We'll see how this draft ends up going, but I think this is pretty telling how much they're putting in so much capital into offensive line, and then they're just like, corner, I guess we'll figure it out when we get to the draft. I mean, I know a lot of us still want a linebacker, but I still want a corner as well right now. Free agency wise, I prefer to get my linebacker there maybe, especially with big names still out there like a Bobby Wagner if we can get him for very cheap, which I doubt happens, but it would be nice. But corner, as far as like the cornerback market after Jamel Dean got signed, I'm like, yeah, first round of the NFL draft, please. Second round, latest third. But yeah, man, that's the end of this video. Please get in the comment section. Let me know how you feel about everything discussed in this video. Please leave a like on this video if you liked it, if you learned anything. Let me know how you feel about this Trent Scott signing. Do you feel like he's going to be able to contribute? Do you think he's even going to make the team? Do you think he even has the slightest chance of becoming a starter potentially at some point in his career? Let me know. And of course, man, please leave a like on this video if you liked it, if you learned anything. And I appreciate all the support, man. Shouts out to all of my sponsors, especially my Pro Bowl sponsors whose names you see scrolling on the screen right now. I'm going to catch y'all later. I'm out.